good evening from Kyoto, and we're at the Yachio Nansenji where we're having a conference dinner, and we're here with Professor Brian Victoria. Professor, could you introduce yourself for us, please?
So I'm a senior research fellow at the Oxford Centre for Buddhist Studies in the UK. However, I'm a non-resident researcher, so I actually live here in Kyoto.
Thank you, Professor. And earlier today, you gave a presentation titled The Shōwa Restoration in 1930s Japan, True National Socialism. Now, why is it important to talk about the Shōwa Restoration today?
Well, one thing particularly here in Japan, after World War II, the role of the emperor, in this case Emperor Hirohito, has been totally disguised. He's been turned into a puppet of the military. When what I was presenting today was to show that he was actually in charge of Japan, in charge of the military, and that he was responsible, together with his court advisors, that he was responsible for World War II as far as Japan was concerned. And yet, today, in Japan, they have pretended, schools teach that he was only a puppet of the military and that he was not in charge. And so I think it's very important for all people everywhere, especially for young people, to be able to learn the true history of their own country, especially when the true history involves the death. About 3 million Japanese died, and over 20 million other Asians, particularly in China, they died. And if you don't understand who was responsible, how can you prevent it from happening again?
One of the main thing that we talk about is National Socialism.
Yes.
In the general world, we tend to think of National Socialism begins in Hitler Germany.
That's right.
But you were saying that in Japan, essentially, from Ikki's plan in 1919, which was arguably the original of National Socialism.
Before Hitler wrote Mein Kampf.
Why has that story of Hitler overshadowed the so-called originality of Japan National Socialism?
Well, that's because, of course, we think of the Nazis, and that really is an abbreviation of the National Socialist Workers' Party of Germany. And, of course, they took over the country. So it's only natural to think that since they claim to be National Socialists, that they were in control of Germany. But what I tried to show this morning was that, in fact, behind Hitler were the major German corporate leaders, particularly the armaments, weapons makers, because they knew that they could make a lot of money from rearming Germany once Hitler took power. In Japan, it was different. And why? It was different because in Japan, the National Socialists really wanted to have domestic political and economic reform. They especially wanted to have land reformation. All right? And that was a threat to the big landowners. And they were also opposed to the large Japanese corporations called zaibatsu. Today we still have them, the Mitsubishi Company, the Mitsui Company, etc. It turns out that Emperor Hirohito himself was the richest man in Japan. He was rich because he had the largest amount of land and because he had thousands of shares in these large zaibatsu corporations. From his point of view, he did not want to see any kind of socialist reform in the country. So, from his point of view, and also from the point of view of the corporations and the landowners, the National Socialist movement in Japan, which was called the Shōwa Restoration movement, that movement was seen as a danger. And so when the military finally rose up against him in February of 1936, he had all of the leaders shot, including Kitaiki, who was a civilian who was not involved in the uprising, but he had provided the National Socialist ideology for the young officers. The Japanese people had been taught that the emperor was a descendant of the sun goddess, and so that he was at least semi-divine, and that if you went against his wishes, you were actually going against the order of the world. All right? And that was the worst thing you could do. So it was easy for the emperor and for the zaibatsu and the landowners, it was easy for them to make it look like the young officers and their uprising was not because they wanted to help the ordinary people, not because they wanted to have land reform, but was only because they wanted to increase the power of the military. Right? And so that made it easy for the emperor to suppress them.
Now, as Japan today is facing economic stagnation, what is the single biggest lesson for a Japanese citizen or the administration to learn from the 1930s failure? And how can the society address this economic anger without empowering extremism?
Wonderful questions, no simple answers. But today, most Japanese feel they are living in a democracy. Americans also think they're living in a democracy. But when you look behind the scenes, you find that all of the political leaders are given political funds, support monies, all right? And they will only support political leaders who support them. What happened as a result of World War II was that the Japanese people believed the Japanese military were the bad guys, all right? And if we just got rid of the military, everything would be all right. Right? So today, the Japanese military is relatively small. It's not seen as a danger. So Japan already has the 7th strongest military in the world. And if Takaichi and her plans are successful, it will have the 3rd strongest military in the world in 5 years. To build that military, that means you have to take the money away from social support and put it into weapons production. For the Mitsubishi and the Mitsui, once again, there is lots of money in making weapons. We can see that in America, of course. And America is gradually become, it's still a strong country, but it has many internal problems, so it can't be as strong in Asia as it once was. So that means there's a chance for Japan to once again reassert its power in Asia as a great military leader. And so the danger is that Japan, because it seems to be a democracy, the Japanese people will accept once again for Japan to become a major military nation. And what happens in America and in most countries, the minute when they become large military powers, sometimes, often, sooner or later, they go to war. And that's why it's so important for the Japanese people to understand who was really responsible for the war.
Thank you, Professor. That's Professor Brian Victoria. You can see the full video recording of his presentation in the link below in the description. See you next time.